Welcome to Legends of Humanity, the international history channel where we bring to life the stories of the extraordinary individuals who changed the world. Today, we journey into the life of Catherine the Great, the legendary Empress of the Russian Empire, a symbol of intellect, power, and visionary reform. From a German princess to the ruler of the largest empire on earth, she transformed Russia through bold expansion, cultural enlightenment, and unwavering ambition. She didn't just rule a nation, she reshaped the future of an empire and left behind a legacy that echoes across history. Childhood and Prussian origins in the small, historically significant city of Stettin, then part of the Kingdom of Prussia, and now Szczecin. In Poland, a child named Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst was born on May 2, 1729. Her lineage, though princely, was not one of immense power or wealth. She was the daughter of Christian August, Prince of Anhalt-Zerbst, a minor German prince who also served as a Prussian field marshal and governor of Stettin. Her mother was Johanna Elizabeth of Holstein-Gottorp, a woman whose own family connections would prove to be surprisingly pivotal. Sophie's early years were spent in a relatively modest court for royalty, a stark contrast to the sprawling grandeur of the Russian Empire she was destined to one day command. From her tender years, Sophie's upbringing was marked by a strict discipline characteristic of German Protestant nobility. Education was paramount, focusing on a broad range of subjects. She was instructed in history, geography, and theology, alongside the essential courtly graces. Language instruction was rigorous. She became fluent in German and French, the latter being the lingua franca of European aristocracy. Her intellect was keen, and she approached her studies with a diligent seriousness that belied her age. However, her childhood was not one of doting affection. Her mother, cold and ambitious, often favored Sophie's younger brother, leaving Sophie to cultivate an inner resilience and an independent spirit from an early age. This emotional distance fostered in her a certain self-reliance and a sharp observational skill, traits that would serve her well in the Byzantine world of court politics. Sophie's world was constrained by the realities of her family's minor status. Her future, like that of many princesses of her era, was expected to be shaped by a politically advantageous marriage. Her mother, ever alert to opportunities for advancement, meticulously cultivated connections within the more powerful European courts. It was these very connections, specifically through her mother's brother, the Bishop of Lübeck, an administrator of Holstein-Gottorp, that would ultimately lead to the most significant turning point in Sophie's young life. The Empress of Russia, Elizabeth Petrovna, was searching for a suitable bride for her nephew and designated heir, Grand Duke Peter Fyodorovich. Peter was the son of Anna Petrovna, Elizabeth's deceased sister, and Karl Frederick, Duke of Holstein-Gottorp. Through her mother's Holstein-Gottorp lineage, Sophie was Peter's second cousin. This distant familial tie, combined with her strong Protestant background and reputation for intelligence and good conduct, made her an appealing candidate to the Empress. The political implications were subtle, yet significant. A marriage to a minor German princess posed less of a threat to Russian political stability than a union with a more powerful European royal house. In 1744, at the age of 14, Sophie, accompanied by her mother, embarked on the long, arduous journey to Russia. She arrived in a foreign land, a world away from the familiar confines of Stettin. The vastness of the Russian Empire, its unique culture, and the opulence of its imperial court must have been overwhelming for the young German princess. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, a profound adaptation began. She understood implicitly that her future, and indeed her survival, depended entirely on her ability to integrate and appeal to her new environment. This fateful journey marked the end of her innocent Prussian childhood and the beginning of her transformation into the figure who would one day be known as Catherine the Great. A fateful marriage to Russia, the arrival of the young Princess Sophie in Russia in February 1744, was fraught with both expectation and apprehension. Her immediate priority was to impress Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, a formidable and capricious ruler and to secure the approval of the Russian court. From the outset, Sophie approached this challenge with a remarkable blend of pragmatism and ambition. She understood that her future depended not merely on a marriage contract, but on a complete transformation of her identity to align with the demands of her new, grand environment. The most crucial aspect of this transformation was her conversion to the Russian Orthodox faith. The Orthodox Church was inextricably linked with the Russian state and the imperial family. To become Empress, Sophie had to renounce her Lutheran upbringing and embrace the dominant religion of her future subjects. She undertook this task with an earnestness that surprised many, dedicating herself to studying the tenets of orthodoxy, learning its rituals, and memorizing its prayers. Her tutor, Archimandrite Simon Todorsky, attested to her diligence. This act of conversion was not merely a spiritual one, it was a profound political statement, signaling her commitment to Russia and its people. On June 28, 1744, she was formally received into the Russian Orthodox Church, and on this momentous occasion, she was given the new name that would forever define her destiny, Catherine Alexeyevna. Her engagement to Grand Duke Peter Fyodorovich, the Empress's designated heir, was a matter of statecraft rather than personal affection. Peter, her second cousin, was a young man of fragile health and an immature, often volatile temperament. He was deeply fond of military drills, particularly those of his native Prussia, and displayed little interest in statesmanship or genuine connection with those around him. Their initial encounters revealed a distinct incompatibility. Catherine, intelligent and perceptive, quickly recognized his deficiencies, yet she approached their union with a sense of duty and a strategic mind. She saw her role as one of survival and eventual influence, rather than romantic fulfillment. The wedding of Catherine and Peter took place on August 21, 1745. Amidst the opulent splendor of the Russian imperial court, it was a grand affair, designed to project the power and continuity of the Romanov dynasty, yet for the young bride, it marked the beginning of a profoundly isolating and challenging chapter. Her marriage, intended to secure her future, became a gilded cage. Peter proved to be a difficult and indifferent husband. He neglected her, openly pursued other women, and often behaved with a childish cruelty. Their marital bed remained largely unshared, and the lack of an immediate heir became a source of increasing anxiety and tension within the court. Catherine, ever the astute observer, dedicated herself to navigating the treacherous waters of the Russian court. She continued her rigorous self-education, secretly devouring books on history, philosophy, and political theory, particularly the works of Enlightenment thinkers like Montesquieu and Voltaire. She mastered the Russian language, a crucial step that Peter, despite his position, largely neglected. She cultivated relationships with influential courtiers and military officers, slowly building a network of allies and supporters, all while maintaining an outward facade of obedience and humility. This period, characterized by profound personal neglect and intellectual isolation, became a training ground. It sharpened her intellect, hardened her resolve, and instilled in her an unshakable determination to not only survive the indignities of her marriage, but to ultimately seize the destiny she increasingly felt was her own. The grand marriage, initially a path to a predetermined future, paradoxically became the crucible in which her ambition for a far greater role was forged. Life in the Russian court and years of endurance, the gilded cages of imperial palaces often conceal profound loneliness, and for the young Grand Duchess Catherine, her early years in the Russian court were a masterclass in endurance and strategic observation. Her marriage to Grand Duke Peter was a loveless union, characterized by his immaturity, his fascination with Prussian military drills, and his overt disregard for her. He often spent his evenings playing with toy soldiers, while Catherine, isolated and overlooked, was left to her own devices. This neglect, however, became an unexpected blessing. It forced her to develop an extraordinary inner life and a keen understanding of the power dynamics at play within the vast, complex Romanov court. Catherine dedicated herself to rigorous self-education. While Peter squandered his time, she devoured books, often in secret, on a wide array of subjects. She read voraciously about philosophy, history, and political theory, immersing herself in the radical ideas of the Enlightenment. Thinkers like Montesquieu, Voltaire, and Diderot became her silent companions, their writings opening her mind to concepts of enlightened governance, human rights, and the rule of law. This intellectual pursuit not only enriched her mind, but also provided a stark contrast to Peter's intellectual shallowness. Crucially, she also devoted herself to mastering the Russian language, diligently practicing with her attendants, a feat her husband, despite being the heir, never truly accomplished. This dedication to Russian culture and language would later earn her the respect and affection of the Russian people and the Orthodox Church, a significant advantage over her German-born husband. Her relationship with Empress Elizabeth was similarly complex. Elizabeth, while having chosen Catherine as Peter's bride, was also capricious and prone to suspicion. She initially saw Catherine as a potential rival for Peter's affection and was anxious about the lack of an heir. This placed immense pressure on Catherine, who lived under constant scrutiny, carefully concealing her burgeoning intellect and political acumen beneath a veneer of compliant domesticity. She learned the art of patience, the necessity of appearing harmless, and the subtle ways to cultivate alliances within the court without appearing to challenge existing authority. She became a meticulous observer of human nature, learning who to trust, who to flatter, and who to avoid. Despite the personal indignities and the constant pressure to produce an heir, Catherine managed to navigate these treacherous years. Her first child, a son named Paul, was born in 1754, much to the relief of the Empress. However, Elizabeth immediately took the infant away to raise him herself, further isolating Catherine from her own child. The paternity of Paul and of her later children would remain a subject of historical debate, hinting at the constrained and often unfulfilling nature of her personal life within the court. These years of forced isolation, intellectual growth, and careful networking transformed the once modest German princess into a formidable woman with a sharp mind and an unshakable will. As Empress Elizabeth's health declined in the late 1750s, Peter's behavior became increasingly erratic and his unpopularity grew. Catherine, witnessing the unraveling of the court and the mounting resentment towards her husband, understood that a critical juncture was approaching. The suffering and indignities she had endured had not broken her spirit. Instead, they had forged her into a shrewd and calculating survivor. She had spent nearly 2 decades meticulously observing, learning, and planning, slowly building a foundation of support that would prove indispensable in the tumultuous events that lay just over the horizon. The quiet, isolated Grand Duchess was preparing for a dramatic, unforeseen ascent to power. Cha conspiracy and the coup of 1762, the long, agonizing wait in the shadow of Empress, Elizabeth's court finally ended in January 1762 with her death. Her nephew, Catherine's estranged husband, ascended to the throne as Emperor Peter III. For Catherine, this was a moment of profound personal and political reckoning. Peter's reign, though brief, was a spectacular display of incompetence, capriciousness, and an almost fanatical devotion to all things Prussian. He openly antagonized the powerful Russian Orthodox Church, confiscated church lands, and alienated the nobility by mocking Russian traditions and favoring his Holstein retainers. Most critically, he infuriated the military, especially the Imperial Guard, by withdrawing Russia from the 7 Years' War, abandoning a hard-won alliance against Prussia, his idol, Frederick the Great, and even offering aid to his former enemy. Peter's erratic behavior and his deep unpopularity created a fertile ground for dissent and conspiracy. Catherine, though seemingly a powerless Grand Duchess, had meticulously cultivated a network of influential supporters over her long years in Russia. She had earned the loyalty of key figures within the Imperial Guard and among the disgruntled nobility, who saw in her a more stable, intelligent, and distinctly Russian alternative to the volatile Peter. Among her most crucial allies were the 5 Orlov brothers, particularly Grigory Orlov, an influential guards officer and her lover, who was fiercely devoted to her cause. Other key conspirators included Count Nikita Panin, a shrewd diplomat, and Princess Dashkova, a brilliant and fiercely independent woman. The conspirators moved swiftly and decisively. Sensing the growing desperation and contempt for Peter's rule, they determined that the moment was ripe for a swift coup. The plan was executed with remarkable precision and speed on July 9, 1762, June 28, Old Style. Peter was at his summer palace in Oranienbaum, outside St. Petersburg. Catherine, who was in Peterhof, was informed that the guard regiments were ready to act. She immediately dressed, mounted a horse in a guard's uniform, and rode to the barracks in St. Petersburg. Her appearance, resolute and dignified, immediately rallied the soldiers. With thunderous cheers, the regiments declared their allegiance to her. Accompanied by a swelling force of loyal troops, Catherine then marched towards the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. The city quickly fell under her control with virtually no resistance. The Holy Synod, the supreme governing body of the Russian Orthodox Church, and the Senate, the highest government body, swiftly declared Peter deposed and proclaimed Catherine as the new Empress. This act was a stunning display of political power, legitimizing her claim through the support of both the military and the traditional pillars of Russian authority. Meanwhile, Peter, completely unprepared for such a swift and organized rebellion, attempted to rally his few remaining loyalists. However, his efforts were futile. Trapped and abandoned, he was apprehended and brought to Peterhof, where he was forced to sign a document of abdication. Within days of the coup, on July 17, 1762, Peter III died while under house arrest. The official cause of death was given as a severe bout of hemorrhoidal colic, but it is widely believed by historians that he was murdered by the Orlov brothers, ensuring that no challenge to Catherine's newly acquired throne could arise from his return. Catherine, just 33 years old, had accomplished the extraordinary. She had not only survived years of neglect and danger within the hostile Russian court, but had orchestrated a flawless coup, dethroning her husband and seizing absolute power. Her ascension was a testament to her profound intelligence, her strategic patience, and her unparalleled ability to forge powerful alliances. The German princess, once a lonely outsider, now sat firmly on the throne of Russia, ready to embark on a reign that would redefine the nation and leave an indelible mark on European history. The era of Catherine the Great had truly begun. Early reign reforms, the light of the Enlightenment, with the crown now firmly placed upon her head, Catherine II faced the formidable task of legitimizing her rule and proving herself a capable sovereign. Her ascension, born of a coup and shadowed by her husband's death, demanded immediate and impactful action. Unlike many monarchs who consolidated power through repression, Catherine, deeply influenced by the Enlightenment ideals she had quietly studied for years, sought to build her reign on a foundation of reform, reason, and a profound understanding of her new homeland. She envisioned herself as an enlightened despot, a ruler who, while absolute, governed for the betterment of her people and the modernization of her state. Her early years on the throne were marked by an intense focus on legislative and administrative improvements. One of her most ambitious projects was the Legislative Commission of 1767. Convening representatives from all classes of Russian society except the serfs, this commission aimed to codify Russia's antiquated and chaotic legal system. For this monumental undertaking, Catherine herself authored the Nakaz instruction, a radical document infused with the spirit of Montesquieu's The Spirit of the Laws and Beccaria's On Crimes and Punishments. It advocated for legal equality, the abolition of torture, and a more humane justice system. While the commission ultimately failed to produce a new code due to its unwieldy size and the vast differences among its delegates, the Nakaz itself was a groundbreaking statement of principle. It demonstrated Catherine's intellectual prowess and her genuine commitment to reform, projecting an image of Russia as a nation embracing progressive European thought. Beyond law, Catherine turned her attention to critical social institutions. She recognized the dire state of Russian education and initiated efforts to expand access. While universal education remained a distant goal, she established the Smolny Institute for Noble Girls in 1764, the first state-funded institution of its kind in Russia, aiming to produce educated women who could elevate Russian society. She also displayed a remarkably progressive stance on public health, personally taking the revolutionary step of being inoculated against smallpox in 1768 at a time when the procedure was widely feared. This bold act, undertaken to set an example for her people, was a testament to her embrace of scientific advancement and her practical approach to governance. Catherine's intellectual curiosity extended beyond her own borders. She engaged in extensive correspondence with leading Enlightenment figures across Europe, most famously Voltaire and Denis Diderot. She styled herself as a patron of the arts and sciences, using these relationships to burnish Russia's image as a rising European power, a land of intellectual vibrancy, rather than a backward, autocratic state. Voltaire, her most enthusiastic correspondent, admired her intellectual depth and progressive ideas, famously calling her the Semiramis of the North. These dialogues, though sometimes flattering and idealized, provided Catherine with a platform to discuss ideals of governance, liberty, and societal progress. Despite her enlightened ideals, Catherine's reforms often faced significant limitations, particularly concerning the vast majority of the Russian population, the serfs. While she personally disapproved of serfdom, the political realities of her dependence on the land-owning nobility prevented any significant attempts at abolition or even substantial improvement in their conditions. Indeed, in some ways, serfdom deepened during her reign. This pragmatic compromise highlighted the inherent tension between her Enlightenment ideals and the entrenched social and political structures of autocratic Russia. Nevertheless, her early reign marked a significant shift, introducing a new era of intellectual curiosity, administrative ambition, and a conscious effort to integrate Russia into the mainstream of European intellectual and political thought, setting the stage for even grander ambitions. Conquest of the South, annexation of Crimea. Having established her intellectual credentials and initiated a series of domestic reforms, Catherine's reign soon shifted its focus to a realm where Russia's ambitions had long simmered: expansion. The vast, fertile lands to the south, bordering the Black Sea, were under the tenuous control of the Ottoman Empire and its vassal, the Crimean Khanate. For centuries, this region had been a source of raids on Russian territories and a strategic barrier to Russia's access to warm water ports. Catherine, with a keen eye for geopolitical advantage and a deep-seated desire to secure Russia's southern flanks, embarked on a series of aggressive foreign policies that would redefine the map of Eastern Europe. The first major confrontation came with the Russo-Turkish War of 1768-1774, sparked by Ottoman provocation over Polish affairs. The war quickly became a grand display of Russian military prowess. Catherine's generals, such as Pyotr Rumyantsev and Alexei Orlov, brother of Grigory Orlov, achieved stunning victories. The Russian Navy, remarkably, sailed from the Baltic Sea all the way to the Mediterranean, achieving a decisive victory over the Ottoman fleet at the Battle of Chesma in 1770, a feat that shocked European powers. On land, Russian forces swept through Ottoman territories, demonstrating the growing strength and modernization of the Russian military under Catherine's direction. The war concluded with the Treaty of Kuchuk-Kainarka in 1774, a resounding diplomatic triumph for Russia. The treaty granted Russia significant territorial gains, including strategic ports on the Black Sea, and, most importantly, established the Crimean Khanate as an independent state, effectively severing its ties to the Ottoman Empire. This independence, however, was merely a precursor to annexation. Catherine had achieved her strategic objective of weakening Ottoman control and creating a buffer zone for future expansion. The stage was set for the complete incorporation of the highly coveted peninsula. The period following the treaty was marked by intense Russian influence in Crimea. Prince Grigory Potemkin, Catherine's most trusted advisor and lover during this period, played a pivotal role in engineering the final annexation. A brilliant administrator and an ambitious statesman, Potemkin cultivated pro-Russian factions within the Khanate and systematically undermined its fragile independence. He built new cities and naval bases, most notably Sevastopol, laying the groundwork for the powerful Black Sea Fleet. These actions were conducted with Catherine's full approval and strategic guidance. Finally, in 1783, Catherine formally annexed the Crimean Peninsula, justifying the action by citing instability in the region and the need to protect Russian interests. This was a masterstroke of geopolitical maneuvering. The annexation not only secured Russia's southern border, but also provided invaluable warm water access to the Black Sea, opening up new trade routes and allowing the projection of Russian naval power into the Mediterranean. The Black Sea Fleet became a formidable force, guarding Russia's new possessions. The acquisition of Crimea was a monumental achievement for Catherine, symbolizing the expansion of Russia's new Russia, Novorossiya territories. It significantly boosted her prestige both domestically and internationally, solidifying her image as a powerful and decisive ruler. The fertile lands and strategic ports transformed Russia's economic and military capabilities, fundamentally altering the balance of power in Eastern Europe. This strategic triumph underscored her reign's commitment to expanding Russia's borders and establishing it as a dominant force on the global stage, a legacy that would echo for centuries. Pugachev's rebellion, even as Catherine celebrated her triumphs on the international stage with the annexation of Crimea and the expansion of Russian influence, her reign faced its gravest internal threat, a terrifying conflagration that exposed the deep social fissures simmering beneath the surface of imperial grandeur. This was Pugachev's rebellion, a massive peasant uprising that challenged her authority more directly than any foreign power ever could. The roots of the rebellion lay in the harsh realities of serfdom and the widespread discontent among Russia's vast peasantry, Cossacks, and various ethnic minorities in the Volga and Ural regions. While Catherine's enlightened ideals had inspired the Nakaz, her practical reliance on the nobility for political stability meant that the condition of serfs had, in many ways, worsened during her reign. Landowners gained even more power over their serfs, and state serfs faced increasing burdens. This simmering resentment found a charismatic and dangerous leader in Yemelyan Pugachev, an illiterate Don Cossack. In 1773, Pugachev emerged claiming to be the miraculously escaped Emperor Peter III, Catherine's supposedly murdered husband. This audacious claim, resonating with a deeply ingrained popular belief that a good Tsar would eventually free them from oppression, ignited the flames of revolt. Pugachev, with cunning and a mastery of propaganda, promised the abolition of serfdom, an end to oppressive taxes, and freedom for all peasants and Cossacks. His message spread like wildfire through the discontented rural populace, drawing in a diverse following that included Cossacks, serfs, factory workers from the Ural mines, and non-Russian ethnic groups like the Bashkirs and Tatars who harbored their own grievances against Russian authority. The rebellion rapidly escalated, transforming from a localized uprising into a full-scale civil war. Pugachev's forces, initially a ragtag army, gained momentum and inflicted several defeats on government troops. They overran numerous small fortresses and towns, capturing significant areas between the Volga River and the Ural Mountains. Landowners and their families, seen as direct symbols of oppression, became targets of brutal violence as the rebels plundered estates, spreading terror and panic. The capture and burning of Kazan in July 1774 marked the zenith of the rebellion's power, bringing the threat perilously close to the heart of the empire. Catherine, initially dismissive of Pugachev as merely a common brigand, quickly recognized the existential threat he posed to her throne and the very social fabric of Russia. Her best troops and generals, including the formidable Alexander Suvorov, were diverted from the ongoing war with the Ottoman Empire to crush the rebellion. The imperial forces, though initially struggling against the widespread nature of the revolt and the zealousness of Pugachev's followers, gradually brought their superior organization and firepower to bear. The turning point came with a decisive defeat for Pugachev near Tsaritsyn, modern-day Volgograd, in September 1774. The rebellion was systematically suppressed, and Pugachev himself, betrayed by his own Cossack followers while attempting to flee, was captured. He was brought to Moscow in an iron cage, a public spectacle of imperial might, and on January 21, 1775, Yemelyan Pugachev was publicly executed, beheaded and dismembered in a brutal display designed to send an unequivocal message to any future rebels. The Pugachev Rebellion was the greatest challenge of Catherine's reign, forcing her to confront the profound social inequalities within her empire. The uprising, though brutally suppressed, left an indelible mark on Catherine's policies. It cemented her alliance with the nobility, whom she now saw as the essential bulwark against popular unrest. While her Enlightenment ideals had previously leaned towards some reforms for the peasantry, the trauma of the rebellion led her to largely abandon any significant efforts to alleviate serfdom. Instead, her focus shifted to strengthening the centralized state administration and further consolidating the power of the landed gentry, ensuring their continued loyalty. The rebellion underscored the inherent contradictions of her enlightened absolutism, revealing the limits of reform when faced with the raw power of social grievances and the imperative of maintaining autocratic control. Love and controversial personal relationships. For a monarch who ruled with such formidable political and intellectual power, Catherine the Great's personal life was remarkably unconventional and became a subject of both fascination and controversy, both during her lifetime and in the centuries that followed. Unlike her estranged and indifferent husband, Peter III, Catherine sought companionship, intellectual stimulation, and emotional fulfillment beyond the confines of duty. These desires led to a series of significant relationships with a succession of influential men, often at the highest echelons of her court and military. While these affairs were scandalous by contemporary standards, they rarely, if ever, diminished her absolute grip on power. Indeed, in many instances, they were strategically intertwined with her political objectives. Her most enduring and politically significant relationship was with Grigory Potemkin. Their bond, which began in the mid-1770s, evolved from passionate lovers to devoted confidants and partners in governance. Potemkin was not merely a romantic interest. He was a brilliant military strategist, an astute administrator, and a powerful visionary who shared Catherine's grand ambitions for Russia. He played a crucial role in the annexation of Crimea and the development of New Russia, Novorossiya, in the south, overseeing the construction of new cities, ports, and naval bases. Their collaboration was extraordinarily productive, driving many of the most significant territorial expansions and internal development projects of her reign. Even after their romantic relationship cooled, their deep respect and political partnership endured until his death in 1791, a loss that profoundly affected Catherine. Beyond Potemkin, Catherine had several other notable favorites, each holding a prominent position at court for a period. These relationships, while often marked by genuine affection and intellectual rapport, were also carefully managed by Catherine. She was the one who controlled the terms, granting her lovers immense wealth, titles, and influence, but always ensuring that ultimate political power remained firmly in her hands. Men like Stanisław August Poniatowski, whom she placed on the Polish throne before their youthful romance faded, and Alexander Lanskoy, a younger, charming favorite whose early death deeply grieved her, highlight the diversity of her personal connections. These relationships often provoked gossip and condemnation from rival European courts, eager to malign the powerful female monarch. But within Russia, while known, they were generally accepted as part of the imperial court's reality. What truly distinguished Catherine's approach to these relationships was her ability to compartmentalize her personal desires from her political acumen. She never allowed her affections to compromise her decision-making or undermine her authority. Her lovers, even the most influential like Potemkin, served at her pleasure and were ultimately instruments of her will. They were expected to be intelligent, capable, and loyal, often serving important roles in her administration or military campaigns. This pragmatic approach ensured that her personal life, however unconventional, did not destabilize her rule. The controversial nature of her personal life has often overshadowed her immense achievements in historical narratives, reducing her to caricatures of a lustful empress. However, a more nuanced understanding reveals a woman who, in an era dominated by male power, sought genuine connection and intellectual partnership, while never relinquishing the power she had fought so hard to seize. Her ability to balance passionate personal relationships with ruthless political pragmatism is a testament to her unique character and her unshakable determination to rule Russia on her own terms, regardless of societal norms or criticisms. Her relationships, while unconventional, were ultimately subservient to the grander project of her reign, the strengthening and glorification of the Russian Empire. Westernization policies and arts beyond military conquests and political maneuvers, Catherine the Great harbored a profound ambition to transform Russia into a truly European power, not just in terms of territory and military might, but also in its culture, intellectual life, and social norms. She was a fervent proponent of Westernization, building upon the foundations laid by Peter the Great, but extending his vision to include the arts, sciences, and societal refinement. Her reign saw a deliberate and expansive effort to integrate Russia into the mainstream of European cultural and intellectual thought, elevating its standing on the global stage. A cornerstone of this policy was her passionate patronage of the arts and sciences. Catherine understood that a flourishing cultural landscape was essential to Russia's prestige and its claim as an enlightened empire. She invested heavily in education, establishing academies, schools, and libraries, though access remained largely limited to the nobility and urban elites. Her personal library was immense, reflecting her insatiable intellectual curiosity. She famously corresponded with leading European philosophers of the Enlightenment, such as Voltaire, Diderot, and D'Alembert, inviting some, like Diderot, to her court and providing financial support. These relationships not only demonstrated her intellectual prowess, but also served as a powerful tool for public relations, painting Russia as a beacon of reason and progress. Perhaps her most iconic cultural legacy is the founding of the Hermitage Museum. What began as a private collection of art she amassed with astonishing speed and expense soon grew into one of the world's greatest art institutions. Catherine was an avid collector, acquiring thousands of paintings, sculptures, drawings, and antique objects from across Europe. She bought entire collections from noble families and art dealers, displaying an astute eye for quality and a relentless drive to enrich Russia's cultural patrimony. The vast wealth she accumulated, often at the expense of the peasantry, was channeled into creating a cultural treasure trove that would rival the greatest museums of Paris, London, and Florence. The Hermitage became a symbol of Russia's cultural sophistication and its burgeoning connection to Western European artistic traditions. Architecture and urban planning also flourished under her patronage. St. Petersburg, the imperial capital, continued its transformation into a grand European city, adorned with magnificent palaces, cathedrals, and public buildings designed by leading European architects. Catherine also initiated projects to expand and improve infrastructure, though the sheer scale of Russia often limited their impact. She encouraged the development of Russian literature, theater, and music, supporting native talent and introducing European artistic forms to her court. However, this Westernization policy was not without its critics or its inherent contradictions. While she embraced European ideas, the vast majority of her Russian subjects, particularly the serfs, remained untouched by these cultural advancements. The glittering court, speaking French and adopting European fashions, often stood in stark contrast to the traditional, deeply rooted peasant culture. Moreover, while she championed Enlightenment ideals of freedom and reason in her correspondence, the political reality of her reign remained an absolute autocracy. The pursuit of Europeanization was ultimately a top-down project, aimed at strengthening the state and burnishing the image of the monarchy, rather than fundamentally transforming the lives of all Russians. Nevertheless, Catherine's relentless drive to westernize Russia, to make it a cultural and intellectual equal to its European counterparts, profoundly shaped the nation's trajectory and laid the groundwork for its future emergence as a major global power. Death and enduring legacy. After a reign of 34 years, a period of unprecedented expansion, reform, and cultural flourishing for Russia, Catherine the Great's extraordinary life drew to a close. By the mid-1790s, her health was in decline, though her fierce intellect and determination remained undimmed. The revolutionary fervor sweeping across Europe, particularly the execution of Louis XVI in France, hardened her once enlightened stance, leading her to become more conservative and suppress liberal ideas within her own empire in her final years. Yet, her commitment to Russia's power and prestige never wavered. On November 17, 1796, November 6, Old Style, Catherine suffered a stroke at her desk in the Winter Palace. She lingered for several hours, but ultimately succumbed to her illness. She died at the age of 67, leaving behind an empire vastly different from the one she had inherited. Her passing marked the end of an era and the beginning of a period of uncertainty as her son, the often antagonistic Paul I, ascended the throne. She was buried in the Saints Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg, among the Romanov monarchs. Catherine the Great's legacy is immense, complex, and continues to be debated by historians. She is widely regarded as one of Russia's most successful and influential rulers, responsible for transforming the nation into a dominant European power. Her most tangible legacy lies in the sheer expansion of Russian territory. Through shrewd diplomacy and victorious wars, she added approximately 200 square miles to the empire, pushing its borders westward into Poland and southward to the Black Sea. This new Russia, Novorossiya, with its fertile lands and strategic ports, fundamentally altered Russia's geopolitical standing and economic potential, providing vital access to warm water trade routes. Beyond territorial gains, Catherine left an indelible mark on Russia's governance and society. While her dream of a truly enlightened legal code remained largely unrealized, her administrative reforms strengthened central control and streamlined the provincial government, laying the groundwork for a more efficient state. Her patronage of the arts and sciences was transformative. The founding of the Hermitage Museum, her extensive correspondence with European Enlightenment thinkers, and her efforts to promote education brought Russia firmly into the European cultural mainstream. She fostered an image of Russia as a land of intellectual vibrancy and artistic achievement, profoundly influencing the nation's identity. However, her legacy is also shadowed by significant contradictions. Despite her personal disdain for serfdom and her intellectual alignment with Enlightenment ideals of liberty, the plight of the vast majority of Russia's peasantry arguably worsened during her reign. Her reliance on the nobility to maintain power meant that serfdom was not only preserved, but in some cases even deepened, sowing the seeds of future social unrest. Critics also point to her autocratic tendencies and the suppression of dissent, particularly in her later years, as a departure from the liberal ideals she espoused. Nevertheless, Catherine the Great remains a towering figure in Russian and world history. She was a woman of extraordinary intelligence, ambition, and resilience, who through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance seized power and wielded it to reshape a vast empire. She navigated a world dominated by men, proving herself a formidable diplomat, a shrewd politician, and a visionary leader. Her reign marked Russia's emergence as a major European power, an enduring testament to the extraordinary impact of one woman on the course of a nation. You've just listened to the remarkable life of Catherine the Great, one of the most powerful women in history and the Empress who turned the Russian Empire into a European powerhouse. Subscribe to Legends of Humanity to continue exploring the lives of the world's most iconic figures.